Okay, 1 second.
Our flowers usually hold better, but because it's so dry outside,
Mm.
petals are just falling off like anything.
Okay. Oop. Do we have cartel somewhere?
Under your back.
Under my bed. Oh, there
What
it is.
did we call?
Okay, ready?
Regular Bhagavatam, plus?
Yeah, whatever. You just tell me. But I don't need the Bhagavatam. I have electronic book.
We are in the chapter Gajendra returns to the spiritual world.
Chapter what?
In the 8th canto,
Yeah.
chapter number 4.
8,
We
4.
are at text number, where are we, 17, 16?
11, 12 you read.
Where's the Bhagavatam?
Yeah,
Oh.
I think 13.
Shukadev Goswami is now explaining the history of
Okay.
Gajendra, that he was King Indradyumna, and I think text number 13 is the next one. He's now going to explain at some point that the elephant was king, not the elephant, the crocodile was king.
8, 4. You don't remember which verse?
8, 4, 13 is the next one.
13 is the next one. Okay, got it. No problem.
That is the next one.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janamalava Girivadaga Gure Gopi Janamalava Girivadaga Nana Braja Janarandana Suranandana Braja Janarandana Jamuna Tira Manachare Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radho Madhuva Kunya Bikharute Malova Kunya Bikharute Gopijana Malaba Girivadurate Gopijana Malaba Girivadurate Sodanandana Prachajananda Chera Vanachari Jaya Randu Madhva Kunya Bihari Jayuradhu Madhava Kunya Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravidikacharya, also Teta Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace via Jamna, the Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Shridharidas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shitweda Gadadha Shivasri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopiyopanath Shaya Mukunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Machukradam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Yamadamai Ki Jai Shimani Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya, Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pachardi Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deja Tarane. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 4th chapter, text 13. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Evam Vimoksha Gaja Yuta Pam Abja Nabas Tenapi Parshada Gating Gamitena Yukta Gandharva Siddha Vibhudair Upagiyamana Akarmat Bhutang Swa Bhavanang Garudasano Gat. So Evam Vimoksha Gaja Yuttapam Evam Vimoksha Gaja Yuttapam Janabas.
Evam Vimoksha Gaja Yuttapam Janabas.
Tenapi Parshara Gatim Gamitena Yukta.
Tenapi Parshara Gatim Gamitena Yukta.
Gandharva Seda Vibhudair Upagiyamana.
Gandharva Siddha Vibhudair Upagiyamana.
Karmat Bhutam Swabhavanam Garudasano Gat.
Karmat Bhutam Swabhavanam Garudasano Gat.
Evam Vimoksha Gaja Yuttapamabjala Nabas.
Evam Vimoksha
Gaja Yuttapamabjala Nabas. Tenapi Parshada Gatim Gamitena Yukta.
Tenapi Parshada Gatim Gamitena Yukta.
Gandharva Siddha Vibhudair Upagiyamana.
Gandharva Siddha Vibhudair Upagiyamana.
Karma Bhutam Sabhavanam Garudasano Gat. Evam Vimoksha Gajayutta Pamabjanabhas. Tenapi Parshanakatim Gamitena Yukta. Gandharva Siddha Vibhutai Rupagiyamana. Karmadbhutam Swabhavanam Garudasano Gat. Okay.
Evam vimokshya gajayuthabham abjanabhas. Tenapi parsha dagatim gamitena yuktaha. Gandharva siddha vibhudhairupagiyamana. Karmadbhutam svabhavanam garudasano gat.
Anyone else?
Evam vimoksha gacayutta pamabjanabhas. Tena piparsha dagatim gamitena yuktaha. Gandharva siddha vibhudhair upagiyamana. Karmadbhutam svabhavanam garudasano gat. Evam vimoksha gacayutta pamabjanabhas.
Tenapi parshadagatim gamitena yukta.
Gandharva siddha
vibhudhairupagiyamana. Karmadbhutam svabhavanam garudasano gat.
All right. Evam. Thus. Vimoksha. Delivering. Gajayutapam. The king of the elephants, Gajendra. Abjanaba. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. From whose navel sprouts a lotus flower. Tena, by him Gajendra. Api, also. Parshadagatim, the position of the Lord's associate. Gamitena, who had already gotten. Yukta, accompanied. Gandharva, by the denizens of Gandharva Loka. Sita, the denizens of Sithaloka. Vibhudai, and by all great learned sages. Upagiyamana, who were being glorified. Karma, whose transcendental activities. Adbhutam, all wonderful. Swabhavanam, to his own abode. Garuda asana, sitting on the back of Garuda.
sitting on the back of Garuda.
Agat,
Agat,
return.
return.
So translation, upon delivering the king of the elephants from the clutches of the crocodile and from material existence, which resembles a crocodile, the Lord awarded him the status of Sarupya Mukti. In the presence of the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, and the other demigods who were praising the Lord for his wonderful transcendental activities, the Lord, sitting on the back of his carrier, Garuda, returned to his all-wonderful abode and took Gajendra with him. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In this verse, the word vimoksha is significant. For a devotee, moksha or mukti, salvation, means getting the position of the Lord's associate. The impersonalists are satisfied to get the liberation of merging in the Brahman effulgence, but for a devotee, mukti, liberation, means not to merge in the effulgence of the Lord, but to be directly promoted to the Vaikuntha planets and to become an associate of the Lord. In this regard, there's a relevant verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 14th chapter, text 8. Tate nukampam sushamikshimano bunjanavatma kritam vipakam ridvagvaburbir vidadam namaste jiveta yo mukti pade siddhaya bhak. One who seeks your compassion and thus tolerates all kinds of adverse conditions due to the karma of his past deeds, who engages always in your devotional service with his mind, words, and body, and who always offers obeisances unto you, is certainly a bona fide candidate for liberation. A devotee who tolerates everything in this material world and patiently executes his devotional service can become mukti pade siddhaya bhak, a bona fide candidate for liberation. The word dayabhak refers to a hereditary right to the Lord's mercy. A devotee must simply engage in devotional service, not caring about material situations. Thus, he automatically becomes a rightful candidate for promotion to Vaikuntha Loka. The devotee who renders unalloyed service to the Lord gets the right to be promoted to Vaikuntha Loka, just as a son inherits the property of his father. When a devotee gets liberation, he becomes free from material contamination and engages as a servant of the Lord. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 10th chapter, text 6. Muktir hivan yata rupam swarupena vivastiti. The word sarupa refers to sarupya mukti, going back home, back to Godhead, and remaining the Lord's eternal associate, having regained a spiritual body exactly resembling that of the Lord, with 4 hands holding the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma. The difference between the mukti of the impersonalist and that of the devotee is that the devotee is immediately appointed an eternal servant of the Lord, whereas the impersonalist, although merging in the effulgence of the Brahmajyoti, is still insecure and therefore generally falls again to this material world. Aruya kutrena parampadam tata patanchato nadvrita yujmad angrayaha. That's from the Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 2nd chapter, text 32. Although the impersonalist rises to the Brahman effulgence and enters into that effulgence, he has no engagement in the service of the Lord, and therefore he is again attracted to materialistic, philanthropic activities. Thus he comes down to open hospitals and educational institutions, feed poor men, and perform similar materialistic activities which the impersonalist thinks are more precious than serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anadrata yujmad angraya. The impersonalists do not think that the service of the Lord is more valuable than serving the poor man or starting a school or hospital. Although they say, Brahma Satyam Jagan Vidya, Brahman is real and the material world is false, they are nonetheless very eager to serve the false material world and neglect the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And again, the verse. Okay. Evam vimoksha gajayutta pamabjanabash tenapi parshara gatim gamitena yukta gandharvaseda vibudhar upagiyamana karma putam swabhavanam garudasano gat. Okay. Om Ganat Miranda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. This story of Gajendra Mokshana reminds me of another verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this verse comes at a point when Parikshit Maharaj is asking Shukadeva Goswami, why is it that devotees are put into so much difficulty? Here we see Gajendra was put into a lot of difficulty. Of course, ultimately we know the reason why. We're at the end of the chapter. So why is it that devotees are put into so much difficulty? And Shukadeva Goswami referred this question to a conversation between Krishna and Yudhisthira Maharaj. And Yudhisthira Maharaj asked Krishna the same question. Why is there so much difficulty? And we know the Pandavas were subjected to an amazing amount of difficulty. Simply an amazing amount. In the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, you find Narada Muni praising Yudhisthira Maharaj as being the best devotee and the Pandavas being the best devotees. And Yudhisthira Maharaj said, we could not be the best devotees because anyone who hears about us doesn't want to be a devotee. Because you think, these are great devotees. Krishna's with them, basically most of the time, at least when there's in danger. And they're put in all this difficulty. It's amazing how much difficulty the Pandavas had to go through, attempted killings in so many different ways, the house of lac, the attempted killing of Bhimsen with the poison cake. Of course, he became stronger after that point. So it's amazing. And so Yudhisthira Maharaj says, we couldn't be the best devotees. Also, we only see Krishna when there is difficulty. But then at the end, he ends up saying to Narada Muni, therefore we're thinking of more difficulties so that Krishna will stay with us. And of course you have Queen Kunti. She prays in the Bhagavatam, Vipada Santa Taksha Swat Tatra Tatra Jagat Guru. She said again and again send these difficulties. So anyway, so Krishna answers when Yudhisthira asks the question. He says, Yasyaham anugriname harishe tadanam shanai. For those who I especially favor, I take away everything. This is one of Prabhupada's favorite verses, actually. Because Prabhupada himself experienced this. I was listening to a tape the other day. You don't say tape anymore, sorry. I've dated myself. I was listening to a recording where Prabhupada was saying, basically he was fighting against what Krishna wanted him to do. Krishna, why are you doing this? Because Krishna wanted him to renounce his household life and take up the mission as a sannyasi and like that. And so Prabhupada he wanted to remain a good grahasta, and Prabhupada wanted to execute the order of his spiritual master. He was very much focused on the order of his spiritual master, just even from the beginning, right after Prabhupada met him in Calcutta as a young man. But he wanted to do it in a certain way. And Krishna wanted him to do it in a different way. And you see the Prabhupada, at least what Prabhupada is saying, Prabhupada is saying, Krishna, why aren't you letting me do it in this particular way? And even when, we find when the Prabhupada would have the dream that his spiritual master was beckoning to him, what takes sannyas, and Prabhupada said, at least in his recording, he said, I was horrified. Like that. Now, I'm not advocating that everyone takes sannyas. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is that Krishna has a plan, we have a plan, and sometimes the devotees are just trying to understand, what is Krishna's plan for me? Even pure devotees, like you have Jesus Christ, for example, is on the cross, and what does he say? My Lord, why hast thou forsaken me? Now, obviously, he understands God has not forsaken him, but why this plan? So devotees are put into difficulty for a specific purpose. And of course, in the case of Gajendra, he was put into the difficulty of fighting the crocodile in the water, so he would surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna does this with many of his devotees, all of his devotees actually. He puts them, don't get frightened, he put them into situations, all right, let me forget about the word difficulty. He puts them into situations so that they actually have no other recourse other than to surrender to him. So, therefore, we find devotees, when they are put into these difficulties, they actually appreciate what Krishna is doing for them or to them, and they take it as an opportunity to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they don't become resentful. Prabhupada didn't become resentful. Jesus Christ didn't become resentful. Just like Haridas Thakur, put into difficulty, being whipped in 22 marketplaces. He just took it as an opportunity to surrender to the Supreme Personality of God and chant the Lord's holy names. What to speak of Prahlad Maharaj, who was also put into a circumstance with his father, Hiranyakashipu, and he took that as an opportunity to perform devotional service. And undeterred, ahaitakiya pratyata yatma suprasidati. And so we find this in the lives of many great devotees, of all the great devotees. Savai pumsam paro dharma yatad bhaktiya hoksajay. Ahaitakiya pratyata yatma suprasidati. That when they're put into difficulty, it actually, they go on serving Krishna. That's the definition of pure devotional service in the Bhagavatam. Savai pumsam paradharma, that transcendental devotional service, yato bhakti at hoksaja, unto Krishna, at hoksaja. Ahaituki has no material cause. And then the pratyata, it's not stopped under any circumstance. Also in the nutshell verse of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the same concept is there. Anyabi lashita shunyam jnana karma navritam anukul yena krishna nushilanam bhakti rutamam. That pure devotional service is devoid of any personal motivation. Anyabi lashita shunyam jnana karmana, gross or subtle motivation, and it's simply done with the desire to please Krishna, and it never gets stopped under any circumstance. So, then the question arises, how do we deal with a situation when we're put into difficulty? Because we're not on the level of Haridas Thakur, we're not on the level of Jesus Christ, we're not on the level of Prahlad Maharaj. We have to somehow deal with these difficulties that arise, or challenges that arise. So what is it? How are we going to deal with this and remain fixed in Krishna consciousness, which is the question. So, first of all, we have to see that whatever happens to us, is there because it's Krishna's arrangement. First of all, we have to see that. Of course, that doesn't mean that our foolishness is Krishna's arrangement. That's another point. Like Prabhupada, when a devotee, there's many stories like this, when devotees would get into automobile accidents because they fell asleep and they didn't get enough sleep the night before, Prabhupada said it was their foolishness, not Krishna's mercy. Or recently in one of our farm communities that I'm in charge of, a devotee was driving a car and he died during a car accident and he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And so he died because it wasn't Krishna's mercy. He died because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. You understand? Not taking the proper precautions. We have to see that Krishna's protection, because obviously we're talking about Krishna's protection here, and Krishna's mercy, is also based upon using our own brains and our own intelligence. Just like the typical story that Prabhupada tells about the man who had such faith in God and he understood that God was always protecting him. And great faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then there was a flood. This is Prabhupada's story. There was a flood and the water was rising and the government sent a boat to try to protect him. And he said, no, God is going to protect me. And then ultimately the government sent a helicopter to try to save him from the roof. He was on the roof of his house and he thought, no, I'm not going to accept this. God is going to protect me. And then ultimately he died and went back to, I guess he went back to God because he was a great devotee. And he asked God, why didn't he protect him? And God said, don't you fool, you rascal. Didn't you see the helicopter? Didn't you see the boat that I sent you? So, apart from those circumstances where it is actually our fault that we're in difficulty, because regardless of how Krishna conscious you are, the material energy works in a certain way. Many devotees are thinking that by chanting Hare Krishna, the material energy will work in a different way. They're thinking that if you chant Hare Krishna properly, you don't have to change the oil in your car. If you chant Hare Krishna properly, you don't have to take adequate health measures to protect yourself. If you chant Hare Krishna properly, then no matter who you marry, it's going to be compatible. There's all this, in many cases, we're actually too spiritual for our own good. And this of course, is technically called cognitive dissonance, where you deny reality because you're thinking that Krishna is going to change the material energy for you. And he doesn't do that. I mean, once in a while, for a great pure devotee like Gajendra here, or for Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj was thrown into fire, and Krishna actually changed the way the material energy works. But for us, generally, because you may be an exception, I'm not an exception, then Krishna has the material energy work in a certain way. So anyway, getting back to the point. So when Krishna does something, or something happens to us, then yomam pashati sarvatra, sarvam chamayu pashati tashaham na pranashami, sacha me na pranashati, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. We should see him in everything and see everything in Krishna, and then we're never lost to him. So then we see it's Krishna. Okay. So what is he saying to me? What is the message that Krishna is giving me? And then what am I supposed to do about it? Those three things. It's Krishna. I may not like what he's doing. Like we see, Prabhupada didn't like what Krishna was doing with extricating him from his household life. But he understood it was Krishna. And then what am I supposed to do about it? What action, yes, what is he saying to me? Second thing. And then what am I supposed to do about this? And this is how we can approach difficulty. And we see this is how the great devotees approach difficulty in a historical basis. And of course, this is how Gajendra approached it. He actually immediately took shelter of Krishna, started chanting Krishna's name, the prayers that he learned. And then ultimately he got liberated. Now, on the other hand, a pure devotee doesn't aspire for liberation. This is actually interesting too. There's 5 different types of liberation, according to the Vedic literatures. And one of them, the devotee doesn't even accept, what to speak of want, which is called Sayuja Mukti, which Prabhupada makes reference to here in the purport. Sayuja means to merge in the existence of the Lord. You don't actually merge, but it's like the green bird entering the green tree that appears to disappear. But the other types are actually Vaishnava liberations, like Sarupya Mukti, which is mentioned here, and there's all Salokya Mukti, which means living on the same planet. Sharsti, having the opulences of the Lord. Samipya, associating with the Lord. And actually, we can see that Gajendra pretty much got all 4 of those. He was associated with the Lord, he got his opulence, he got a form like the Lord, etc. And he was going to go live on the same planet as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, but a devotee, he may accept these things, but he doesn't aspire for these things. What does he aspire for, though? What does a pure devotee aspire for? What does Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teach us? Mama Janmani Janmanishvare Bhavatad Bhaktir Ahaitaki Twaye. That simply a devotee aspires for service. And Prabhupada actually taught us this lesson very, very strongly. When devotees would try to jump up to a higher platform of devotional service from which they were at the present time. And Prabhupada's famous saying is, work now, samadhi later. There was another statement, I'm trying to remember right now, that's very, very similar now. Desire then deserve. Yeah, desire then deserve. So Prabhupada's Prabhupada's lesson for us was simply to try to please Krishna. And ultimately, that meant simply trying to please the spiritual master. Because Prabhupada's example was that he was simply interested in satisfying the order of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. You don't find Prabhupada mentioning he's aspiring for liberation. Of course, Prabhupada's already liberated, pure devotee, obviously. But we don't find Prabhupada encouraging that so much in the mature devotees of the movement. Obviously in the beginning, back to home, back to Godhead, get out of the material world. Material world's a place of suffering. But ultimately, the mature devotional service that Prabhupada taught was to focus on the order of one's spiritual master as one's life and goal. And, the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada is so explicit about one's duty towards the spiritual master in terms of the story of Puranjana, the whole Puranjana part where this lady's husband passes away, who was a king. And Prabhupada talks about how when the spiritual master passes away, the disciples should be ready to leave the planet unless the disciple is willing and able to carry out the mission of the spiritual master. So Prabhupada, that indicated Prabhupada's mood was very much focused on service. Service and pleasing Krishna. rather than getting out of the material world or pleasing yourself by being in the spiritual world. You know, oftentimes, and I think to a certain extent even more now in ISKCON than before, devotees concentrate so much, actually sometimes exclusively, on, you know, spiritual enjoyment or going back to the spiritual world or understanding one's relationship, which is not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. Understanding one's relationships, so Raganuga Bhakti, or Bhava Bhakti, or Prema Bhakti, and neglecting, to a large extent, Srila Prabhupada's message of preaching Krishna consciousness, or presenting Krishna consciousness, or sharing Krishna consciousness. Yesterday we were talking about this in terms of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's primary messages. Primary messages were Jiva Joy, Nama Ruchi, and Vaishnava Seva. And sometimes we neglect these particular points in Krishna consciousness, and we're thinking, oh, when can I go back to Godhead, or when can I understand my spiritual identity? Prabhupada didn't really encourage it that much. He encouraged us simply to want to please Krishna and Guru, because that's really what the spiritual world is like. You know, when we hear about the spiritual world, it's not just another version of, you know, material sense gratification. It's not like the heavenly planets. You go to the heavenly planets, and you got a lot of material sense gratification. You know, people smell well there. Yeah, and mangoes are as big as whatever. You know, as big as this building, or bigger than the building, without any skin, without, you know, there's rivers of mango juice in the spiritual world. So you think, wow, back to Godhead, you get to dance all the time with Krishna, you get to play with it, you know, which is true. But really, when people are dancing with Krishna, it's not like the dancing of this material world, where you're just enjoying the movement of your material body. And the eating of the prasadam is not like the eating in this material world, where you're just enjoying your tongue. It's all based upon seva. It's all based upon pleasing Krishna. Every moment, every movement in the spiritual world is based upon giving pleasure to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Srimati Radharani, the associates of Krishna. So that's the mood that Prabhupada is teaching us. In the mood of service, to service of Srila Prabhupada. And that mood is the spiritual mood. Not the desire simply just to get out of the material world and enjoy in the spiritual world. Although there is enjoyment. But the enjoyment in the spiritual world is the bhakti ras. The bhakti ras is the loving desire to please the beloved, who's Krishna. That's the bhakti ras. That's the ecstasy in the spiritual world. Not that you got some good halva for the Sunday feast, you know. That the Lakshmi is cooked nicely there in the spiritual world. No bad preparations. So, anyway, so that's another point that I wanted to speak about, liberation. So Gajendra, of course, had the pure devotional mood, otherwise he wouldn't have gone back to Godhead. Not that he was simply pained in this material world. So, anyway, any questions or comments about anything I said? Brahma Prabhu.
This was fantastic. Wonderful. Can one say that when one does one's service, one's practical service,
Yeah.
with properly the focus, and one is in the spiritual world?
When one does practically serve, yes, one is in the spiritual world. Actually, the Bhagavad Gita states that Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmatena Gantavya Brahmakarma Samadhinam. That when one is absorbed in his service, Brahma Karma, which is interesting. Like even in this particular verse, Prabhupada translates karma as just as work. It doesn't necessarily mean material work or karmic reaction, but it means work. So Brahma Karma means work for Brahman. So with Brahman in this particular context doesn't mean the impersonal Brahman. It means basically spiritual, spiritual work, which we call, putting a common nomenclature for Hare Krishnas, yukta vairagya, work within this material world for Krishna, engaging Krishna's energy in Krishna's service. Like you were engaged in a computer, and you're engaged in book production and book distribution and service. So that work, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir, is like putting ghee, havir, into a fire. The fire sacrifice, you put ghee into the fire, the ghee becomes purified. Previously, the ghee was just something material. And Prabhupada even said that the smoke from the fire, the sacred fire, is purified. I don't know if I can appreciate that much, but because I cough a lot after the sacred fire. But Prabhupada said it's purified because it's offered to Krishna. Just like we offer food to Krishna, and the food becomes prasad, or the Lord's mercy. So when we work for Krishna, that work is spiritual. The result of the work is spiritual. The person performing the work is spiritualized. And everything connected with the work is spiritual. Just like the fire cycle. That's happiness, and that's Krishna consciousness. That's the bhakti ras. Yenatma superseda savai pumsam paradharma yata bhakti hoksajay ahoitakiya pratyata yatma supersedate bhagavatam. The only thing that satisfies the self is that unmotivated, not even motivated by liberation, desire for liberation, the unmotivated desire to please Krishna. Again, anyabhilasha tashunyam gyanakarma navratam anukulyena Krishna anushilanam bhakti-uttamam. To serve Krishna in the way that he wants, but to do it gladly, not resentfully, or not ritualistically, niyamagraha.
So the Prabhupada often mentions constantly.
Constantly, yeah.
In his purpose, he says constantly.
Yeah, that's a pratyata. That's the ahaitaki pratyata yatma supersedate. Pratyata means without any stopping. Ahaitaki, no cause and no stopping, regardless of any situation. And look at Prabhupada's example, like coming over in the boat and having these heart attacks. I mean, most of us, if we have a heart attack, I don't know if anyone's here about a heart attack, I haven't, then, serving Krishna, forget it, I mean, I remember, I oftentimes mention this, I mentioned, I had kidney stones about a year and a half ago, and I probably wasn't thinking of serving Krishna. I was probably thinking, Krishna is serving me. Has anyone, you ever had kidney stones? It's described as more painful than a woman giving birth. And it goes on for long. You never give, at least I didn't give birth to it. So I had to have an operation ultimately after a few weeks of it. All I could do was stand up and go, I couldn't even say the whole Maha Mantra. I just stand up and pace back and forth going, Krishna, 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 Krishna. But anyway, I was asking Krishna, I had to be honest, I was Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kam. Anyway, I was wanting liberation. But Prabhupada, I mean, look at the condition that Prabhupada was serving Krishna in. And at that age, I mean, most of you here are not that, or some of you were at that age. But I'm at that age, or actually a little more, 74. And to think of going across the ocean in a boat, a steamship, swimming pool, You know, not a cruise ship. A cruise ship I do, but with no money, no money, not knowing what's going to be there at the other end. I mean, I get upset if they don't pick me up at the airport. Isn't it? I mean, it's just like, and I want to make sure I have enough money, credit cards I travel with, everything's planned in advance. Sometimes even bring my own food with me in case they can't cook properly. Robert actually brought some oats in case there wasn't any like vegetables or anything, grains in America. But you know, it's just like that's a pratyata, undeterred in all circumstances. I mean, Prabhupada is our role model. I mean, really, if you want to know how to be Krishna conscious, take Prabhupada as a role model. You can't imitate him, but you take him as a role model. I mean, for example, I can't think of anyone else to take as my role model. I can't take Arjuna as a role model because there's a lot of things I can't relate to, like killing your family members. And fighting, you know, it's just not my nature. But Prabhupada's example and role model is really what it means to me to be Krishna conscious. And that's, anyway, so that was what I
Absolutely.
wanted to talk about, yeah.
You were a little critical
Uh-oh.
no, I appreciate it, I would say of too many retreats.
Oh, that wasn't my point, too many retreats.
Was not.
No, too much concentration. I didn't say no concentration, too much concentration on like the higher aspects of devotionals. I'm not saying we shouldn't have some idea of the higher aspects, or we shouldn't cultivate the higher aspects, but I would say overemphasis to the exclusion of our mission to serve Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, thank you for asking me that, because I just wanted to clarify that point of our over-exclusion, excluding, the overemphasis, so we actually don't think about the mission. And Prabhupada talked about that too, especially in regard, and I'm not saying anyone's a sahaja, he says this will stop our preaching. So obviously, yes, we should be thinking of advancing devotional service. We should be thinking of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. We should be understanding the different stages of devotional service, Ado Shraddhatata, Sadhu Sangota, Bhajana Kriya, and internally trying to develop these higher stages. But our meditation should be on pleasing Krishna and Guru, because that's really what gets us to the higher stages. I mean, what keeps me going personally is thinking about Prabhupada, what pleases Prabhupada. I mean, personally, it's hard for me to relate personally as a source of motivation to just like, I want to become a coward boy or gopi or something like that. I mean, certainly I understand I do, but to focus on it 24 hours a day, to me, Prabhupada's example is something really specific, concrete, down to earth, that is inspiring. Here's the pure devotee. This is what a pure devotee does. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This is a pure devotee. This is what a pure devotee does. Bhakti Vinod Thakur. This is a pure devotee. This is what a pure devotee does. I mean, any of our acharyas, what can I say? Any of our acharyas, this is what a pure devotee does. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. All these great personalities you mentioned, I'm always admire how they are so, they have such a control over their time that they can, like Prabhupada used to take massage, and at that time he would not manage, but then immediately, now I manage, and now I take prasadam, and now I take a walk, and now I chant, and also, like Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he was also doing so many things. So I got this idea that they were doing a lot of different things, and they were not just chanting or not
Yeah,
just
right,
absorb
exactly.
something, but they would be like very. There was like multitude of things. Like
Yes.
It was very controlled.
Yes.
So that's like.
Well, they were balanced in their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very balanced, and they all actually. Bhakti Vinod Thakur was one of the first ones to have a pocket watch. He didn't have wristwatches at that time, so he would always consult it. Yeah, there were no wristwatches. Like, of course, we have these electronic things that tell us what to do all day long.
I was thinking it's kind of part of like a very sattvic life.
Yeah.
And then then it's difficult to be in sattva, and there's always this tendency to kind of get completely absorbed in something like just meditating or just dancing and
Yeah.
festivals or.
In the moment.
Yeah, he was in the moment, and if you read, of course, we recently had his disappearance day. We talked about him. He had such a strict schedule. Like, he would take rest like at 8 o'clock at night and get up at 10 o'clock at night and write until, like, what, 4 in the
Who
morning.
was that? Bhaktivinoda Thakur?
Bhaktivinoda Thakur, yeah. Write until 4 o'clock in the morning, take a half-hour nap.
And he would be with his family, and he would have work.
Yeah.
And he would combine all those.
Yeah, he
for
was
very
able
long
to have a
time.
balanced life. Yeah, he was very much mission focused. And he produced more books, I think, than anybody else that I can think of. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, isn't it? I mean,
I do not really know how many.
there on his disappearance day, we read a whole list of the books he produced, books and articles he produced, and it was just wow. How can one person do it?
More than Srila Prabhupada?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow.
I think so if you read the list. But even, Srila Prabhupada produced an amazing amount in such a short period of time by being very attentive with his time. He got up every morning, regardless of how late he was doing a preaching program. I remember one time we were in Mexico City, and everybody was up late at a program with Prabhupada in Cuernavaca, which is a city near Mexico City, very small town, beautiful city. And then everyone decided to take rest and not wake up for Mangal Arati, except for Prabhupada. And Prabhupada got up for Mangal Arati, and he wasn't going to Mangal Arati, but he just was writing, and he saw that nobody was up, and he was really upset. Really upset.
I mean, just to read the Bhagavatam takes a long time.
Yeah.
To write it, to compose it, it's miraculous. How Srila Prabhupada did it.
Yeah. I think Prabhupada compared to like wearing away at a stone. A little bit at a time, little bit at a time. Every day, a little bit. And Prabhupada's dedication to that. And running the movement and dealing with, so many financial problems or political problems in India. Amazing, isn't it? And that's a pratyata. It's called a pratyata, which means undeterred devotional service. And dealing with health challenges, too.
Yeah.
Heart attacks. That's after he came to America. He had this heart attack, and probably was so determined to serve, he had them wheel him out of the hospital, with the doctors running behind him, shouting, "You're going to kill the old man." I mean, it's amazing, isn't it?
And he returned, once he returned to India,
Yeah,
after, I think, the second heart attack,
yeah,
but then continued
Yeah.
traveling.
continued. And everything Prabhupada did was based on his mission, which is interesting. Even Prabhupada's massage that Prabhupada took, he did things for his health, but it was so he'd be fit to carry out his mission. It was all based on seva. 24 hours, Prabhupada's resting, Prabhupada's, things that we do for sense gratification. Or I do, sorry. I know you all don't do. But, I do for sense gratification. Prabhupada, those same things, like we're talking about, offering to Brahmaparanam Brahmahavi Brahmagno Brahmanam Ten. That doing as an offering to Krishna, Yukta Vairagya. So Prabhupada's taking prasadam, Prabhupada's resting, Prabhupada's walking was for his health. The story is that Prabhupada did not take his walks before he came to America, but he was advised by a doctor after one heart attack, an old Jewish doctor in New York, to exercise every day. Of course, the doctor also said Swamiji is chanting too much. He chants too much anyway. So Prabhupada didn't take all of his advice. But anyway, you could see that everything Prabhupada did it was that focus. Eke ha Kurunandana. Prabhupada was very inspired by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary in the one verse in Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayadmika buddhir eke ha Kurunandana bahushakta surantascha. I think that those who are on this path are one-pointed. Eke ha Kurunandana. And you just see that. The Prabhupada was just very focused. Whatever he did was for the purpose of pleasing Krishna.
What did Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comment on that?
He said Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur commented that he related that Eke ha Kurunandana to fulfilling the desire of the spiritual master. And that when Prabhupada read that, he connected that obviously to the order he had gotten from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That in the beginning, you were educating young boys, you should preach this message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in English and around the world.
Did Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj tell Srila Prabhupada which books to translate?
I don't know.
I also don't.
I don't know. I know that before, this is something Ravindra Swarupa talked about in his presentation about the founder Acharya, that before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur sent his disciples to the Western world, he actually published some books in English that they could go and present to people. And Prabhupada, before he went to the Western world, he understood he had to have those books. Books are the basis. Because Prabhupada understood that without books, without literature like that, the mission would not have been successful. So Prabhupada planned everything very, very precisely. He understood my spiritual master wanted books before, and also he had that order from his spiritual master that, if you ever get any money, print and distribute books. You could sell the marble from the temple to print books. So Prabhupada was very focused on the strategy. Yeah, he was very strategic. That's the word I wanted to use. That he understood he needed those books in order to present Krishna consciousness. Because without the literature, nobody would take us seriously. That's the one thing about Krishna consciousness, amongst many other things, that differentiates us from every other spiritual organization, group, religion, whatever, is the philosophical presentation, elucidation on spirituality that Prabhupada has given us and given to us by our acharyas. There is no religion, philosophy, spiritual group that comes even close to what our acharyas and Srila Prabhupada have given us. No one, no Christian theologian, no one that comes close. So that's why the books are so important. It establishes us as, I hate to use the word, superior. I hate to say that the best, but let's say the postgraduate study of spirituality, which probably was Prabhupada's actual nomenclature. So the books are extremely important. Books are the basis, they're a foundation. What does that mean? It's the whole foundation of what we do. without the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, we just don't exist. Otherwise, it's like a Hindu society, which is, no potency, no connection. All right, should we end? Late breakfast here.
Yes.
Time for lunch.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.
Right.